management company, and he would do whatever it took to sign up-and-coming artists. The first two famous singers were DJ Quick and the DOC. Both would be lucrative to his network as he went on to meet many members of the gangster rap group NWA. The only problem was the DOC and Dr. Dre were already signed to a label, Ruthless Records, and a group, NWA. But it would turn out that this problem was only a minor one for Suge, who, with his bodyguards, or should I say henchmen, negotiated with the group and label's manager, Eazy-E, by way of lead pipes and baseball bats. It worked, and Dr. Dre, the DOC, and another artist, Michele, were free and clear of their contracts. The former two artists went on to co-found Death Row Records with Suge in 1991. Public feuds. Upon the formation of Death Row Records, Knight claimed he would make it the Motown of the 90s, and this is a man who seems to get what he wants. A deal with Interscope Records in 1992, followed by Dre's wildly successful solo debut album, The Chronic, which made its way to triple platinum status in the US, was the perfect start to making his dream come true. As a bonus, Dre also had a protege, Snoop Dogg, whose album Doggy Style wasn't doing too bad either. But not everything was looking up. A public feud began with Two Live Crew's Luther Campbell. Not one to be taken advantage of, Knight was allegedly seen blatantly carrying a stolen gun when in Miami for a hip-hop convention. He also made his intentions a little more clear with the opening of a private, appointment-only nightclub called Club 662 in Las Vegas. On a phone keypad, 662 translates to MOB, or Member of Bloods. Violent tactics. Feuds between Suge and other artists and producers quickly began popping up. Sean Combs, or Puff Daddy, an East Coast entrepreneur and artist, had a quarrel with Suge. At an award show in 1995, Suge insulted Combs and his label, calling him an executive producer who had to outshine his artists more or less. He claimed Combs could be seen dancing in his artist's music videos or ad-libbing on their songs. And anyone out there who want to be a recording artist and want to stay a star and don't have to worry about the executive producer trying to be all in the videos, all on the records dancing, come to Death Row. It worked out for Suge, who signed MC Hammer, Snoop Dogg, and Tupac in quick succession in 1995. Each artist recorded tracks that found success on the charts. But some of Suge's violent tendencies became too much for others. Dr. Dre became wary of Suge's thuggish reputation and his menacing characteristics and ultimately bowed out, going on to form Aftermath Entertainment. It's no surprise that a host of anti-Dre diss records ensued from Suge's camp. 1995 conviction. Around this time, Suge was facing legal troubles. A federal case brought against him found him guilty of the attack of two rappers at a recording studio in the summer months of 1992. This was in addition to a weapons violation charge. Suge pleaded no contest and only received 5 years probation. Allegedly, he was able to secure this light sentence by promising recording contracts to family members of the prosecuting attorneys. From mogul to alleged murder. Tupac Shakur wasn't on probation, but in prison in 1995, serving 4.5 years around the time of his signing to his record label. How then does one go from jail to signed artist? Suge Knight paid his bail, which was in the $1 million bracket, freeing him from behind the bars during the time of his conviction was being appealed. This was in exchange for Tupac signing to his label. The next year, Tupac made it big with All Eyes on Me. Unfortunately, the happy days were short-lived. In September, Suge and Tupac were members of a group that attacked Orlando Anderson. After leaving a Mike Tyson boxing match, the group returned to the lobby of their hotel. In said lobby, they were caught on tape beating Anderson. Anderson was a Southside Compton Crip gang member. Remember Suge's Member of Bloods Club? Sounds suspicious to me. A few short hours later, the car carrying Knight and Tupac was riddled with bullets. Tupac was fatally struck 4 times, and Anderson became the prime suspect. 6 days after the shooting, on September 13, 1996, Shakur died. Strangely enough, a few months later on March 9, 1997, Shakur's rival on the East Coast, Biggie Smalls, or the notorious B.I.G., suffered the same fate via drive-by shooting in Los Angeles. Knight quickly came under suspicion for the murder even though he was behind bars. Whether he was enraged at the loss of a profitable artist or was seeking revenge as an MOB is unclear, but former artists of his record label, notably Snoop Dogg, have claimed Knight was involved in the murders. The theory. Russell Poole, an ex-detective, only added fuel to the fire that Suge was a prominent figure in both murders of Biggie and Tupac. He claimed that Tupac wanted out of the deal he was agreed to with Suge, becoming part of his record label, and rather see him dead than signed with another label. Suge had him killed. In order to lead the accusers astray, Suge then conspired to have Biggie killed, hopefully diverting attention away from himself as Tupac's murderer. The detective claimed it was Suge, Amir Muhammad, a mortgage broker, the chief of police, the LAPD, and a rogue cop all conspired to have Biggie killed. Ultimately, a $500 million lawsuit ensued pitting Biggie's family, the Wallaces, against the city of LA. Kevin Hackey, once an associate of Suge's record label turned intel source, said he had info implicating Suge Knight. However, in 2010, after much back and forth about whether the attorneys altered Hackey's declarations, the case was dropped. Other theories abounded by the FBI and writers of popular publications. Some claim that Knight actually paid Wardell Pouchy Faust to kill Biggie because he was Puff Daddy's biggest moneymaker. We will never know because though Pouchy lived through one murder attempt, he was not so lucky in a drive-by shooting a year later. 1996 conviction. Suge didn't get away scot-free though. He was sent to jail on October 22, 1996 while he awaited a hearing. The hearing wasn't regarding the murder of Tupac, but rather the fact that he violated his probation when he and others attacked Anderson on September 7, 1996. Suge ended up with 9 years in prison when the decision was handed down on February 28, 1997. He ended up only serving 4 years and was released on August 6, 2001. 2003 conviction. Time behind bars did nothing to dull his violent tendencies, unfortunately. In 2003, he struck a parking lot attendant. On June 21st, Suge was visiting the White Lotus Club in LA, and when he went to leave, he found that his car had been blocked. Bad news for the parking attendant. Suge was arrested for allegedly punching the parking attendant from behind. This was parole violation number 2 in the past 6 months alone. A few months earlier, in December, he was arrested for associating with a known gang member to which a judge gave him 61 days in prison. After only being out from behind bars for a short time, he was sent back for another 10 months. It's safe to say he has a hard time following the rules. It's hard to lead a music empire when you're behind bars. Death Row Records began to struggle until you could say it was on death row itself. 2005 had Suge cited for a moving violation after he was pulled over for an illegal U-turn. He was found to have pot in the car and a lack of insurance, so back to jail he went. Suge had no choice but to file for bankruptcy in 2006. This was partially due to the fact that he had been ordered by a judge to pay $107 million to a woman named Lydia Harris. Harris said that Suge had cheated her out of half the profits and ownership of Death Row Records. But Suge claimed he only had $12 to his name and didn't know a thing about money being kept in banks outside the US or his dealings with an African gold and diamond company. No one bought it, and the judge proceeded to have a bankruptcy trustee take over his record label. Victim of a shooting. Honestly, it's not surprising that Suge is the victim here considering his affinity for violence, but what is surprising is that he didn't seem to instigate it. While at the Shore Club in Miami Beach, Suge was attending a party put on by the one and only Kanye West. He hadn't even had time to knock back a drink when he was shot in the leg. 8 years later, in 2013, the shooter said he was hired by James "Jimmy Henchman" Roseman, a known drug ringleader for reasons that remain unclear. Knight obviously survived and was free to continue seeking out those parole violations. 2008 altercation. In 2008, Suge's record label was put up for auction after Suge had been forced to sell his $1 million mansion. Later, the Death Row Records office would be pillaged and belongings would be sold off. Even an electric chair. Yes, you heard that right. An electric chair that sold for $2,500. But the bad news just kept rolling in for the once lucrative executive. In May of 2008, outside of Shag nightclub in Hollywood, Knight was involved in an altercation. Unlike the parking attendant situation, this time it would be Suge who took the beating. Apparently, he and an unidentified man began arguing over money. When Suge's crew started to beat the man, he was able to land a punch that knocked Suge out cold for nearly 3 minutes. A woman unsuccessfully attempted to commandeer an SUV to take him to the hospital, but was physically removed from the driver's seat after ramming numerous vehicles. Finally, he was taken safely to the hospital, treated, and in true Suge Knight fashion refused to cooperate with the authorities. As the summer heated up, so did Suge's temper. August came with an arrest for the attack of his then-girlfriend, a woman by the last name of Isaac, flashing a knife outside a Vegas strip club, and for possession of pharmaceuticals. Charges of aggregation were dropped when, somewhat unsurprisingly, Isaac mysteriously disappeared and couldn't testify. 2009 and 2012 altercations and arrest. It's a hard-knock life for Suge, who continued to rack up the infractions in the early 2000s. A fight at a private party in the W Scottsdale Hotel put him in the hospital once again, this time for facial injuries. Robert Carnes Jr. and Thomas Leon Anderson Jr. were tased by police and arrested for beating up the music mogul. The fight was said to be regarding business matters, but it was unclear exactly what happened. Later in 2009, Suge was connected to a break-in at artist Akon's house in which 5 men stole $170,000 of the singer's belongings. The robbers claimed it was because Akon owed Suge money. He wasn't charged, but not one to enjoy his freedom for long. In 2010, he was picked up at a shopping mall for failure to appear in court. In 2012, Suge got to add another mugshot to his collection after he was arrested for possession of cannabis and numerous traffic violations resulting in warrants. Amid all this nefarious activity, he is also guilty of owing $500,000 in child support to 3 different women. The gangsta life. Suge tends to live out most of the illicit activities his music is known for rapping about. But his days terrorizing seemingly everyone he came into contact with would soon come to an end. It hadn't even been a hot minute after his 2012 arrest when he again went to jail for a traffic violation in 2013 and was found to have an outstanding warrant. Then, in 2014, he was shot again at a party being hosted by Chris Brown. The man must have 9 lives, because after taking 6 bullets, he walked himself from the West LA Hollywood Sunset Strip nightclub, One Oak, to an ambulance. Law enforcement was at a loss because Suge wasn't saying a word, again. A week and a half later, he was back in action, healed up well enough to carry out a second-degree robbery with comedian Cat Williams. The duo stole the camera of a celebrity photographer, paparazzi, in Beverly Hills. In the end, the robbery trial was the least of his worries and was delayed.